Welcome, everyone, to the Analyst Lounge on the final day of the SPL 2015 Super Regionals. Of course, joining me is Anatoliy, Adanas, and BaRRaCCuDDa. Adanas, why don't you talk to us a little bit about why BaRRaCCuDDa is joining us?
So obviously, during the summer split, we had our MVP voting. Coming out on top of that was Cyclone Spin from North America, and then from Europe, it was Reels X. This time, though, BaRRaCCuDDa is going to be the champion from North America. The fans at home, they voted for the top players in each role. BaRRaCCuDDa obviously won Hunter, and then they took the top 5 from each, or the top player from each role, voted on it, and BaRRaCCuDDa came out on top in North America.
Ooh, and we have a trophy.
So congratulations, John.
Oh, that's
and you
amazing.
finally get to take it home.
Holy cow.
And you're going to Worlds, too.
trophy that I could ever take home.
And you're
my
going to... Wait. Oh, no, he couldn't take home Worlds trophy. It's too big. Doesn't fit in his house. You got your little mini
We thought
one,
we could take it home. We were like, oh, no, that's not your trophy.
But you got like the small versions of it. Like, you got your like little Thor hammer, right?
Yeah, we have this tiny one that's like this big.
You'll
We thought we were going to get like one that's like this big and just like run around our houses naked, just like swinging it around.
If you ever have a kid, you can just like pass it down to him. You can run around with it. It'll be like a rattle.
All right, little baby, this is what I did when I won Worlds. We're just going to smack everything.
Well, congratulations. And why do you think you deserved the MVP?
Honestly, I think it's just my team. They put me in the right areas to just succeed. I have probably the best peel on any team, and my team just protects me and lets me do damage. And also, when the enemy team is going on me, Jeff's like doing whatever he can to keep me alive. So honestly, I think it's just my team that makes me look good.
Well, you're going to be going up against enemy later on, but first, everyone, we have some European games to talk about. Epsilon versus Paradigm Gaming. And as I told you guys a little bit earlier, this is pretty much just going to be us talking about how can Paradigm win. We're not saying that Paradigm is bad. Obviously, they have shown up this week that they are a team to be reckoned with, but Epsilon was 27-1 and decimated yesterday. How does Paradigm have a shot?
It's going to depend on how seriously Epsilon takes these games. I'm assuming they're going to take it very seriously because the first seed is obviously going to go through the preliminary round. And Paradigm had the rougher start in the LAN. They went 3-2 against Dignitas, but then they showed up against, what was it they played? Fnatic?
London Conspiracy?
London Conspiracy, I think it was, yes. So they overtook London Conspiracy, which I kind of thought that they would if they showed up. And from there, we're going to see this matchup. I think Epsilon is going to probably take it, though.
Okay, I want to do what I did yesterday. Let's do predictions now, and then we're going to talk about details later.
I think Epsilon is going to do 3-1.
Ooh, okay, so you give a game to Paradigm.
Yeah.
Adonis?
If Paradigm took it seriously, it's going to be 3-1 Epsilon. If they didn't take it seriously, like they did with Dig, it's going to be like, if they're just like, we qualified for Worlds, we don't care, it's going to be 3-0 Epsilon. And I think that's probably what happened.
Well, Bear, I mean, you have qualified for Worlds, but you're also going to be going up for that seeding. Do you take it seriously, or are you guys a bit more relaxed than you were yesterday?
We're taking these matches about as serious as we did the ones with Eager. In this meta, you can't really do a lot of pre-game. And that sounds weird, but there's just so many different picks. Every team plays differently. You can study them and be like, okay, this is what this team favors. They like these gods, but in that same sense, everyone likes those gods. And every pick ban phase is really different. So you can kind of have a general idea of going into it, but these teams, like, they're really good for a reason. Everyone knows that reason, so you can kind of have an idea, but it's really hard to actually detail they're going to pick ban this entire phase.
Would you put more effort into like a best of 1 then than a best of 5? Because a best of 5 is a lot about adjusting. Would you do would you do the thing where you would just kind of like really study hard for a best of 1 and then best of 5 is kind of like what do they like in general?
Yeah, in our set versus Eager, during the first half of that, we knew what they liked, and then they adjusted to what we liked.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the best of 1, we were like, okay, this is what they like. This is what they're going to pick and ban. We can bait them into the Zong pick because we favored the Zong pick the last few games. We gave them Zong, and then we picked and banned a team comp around Zong to just kind of control the entire map. So, like I said, the best of 5s are a lot about adjusting. So these teams going into best of 1 or their first game, they're going to have a general idea of what they want. Like, this is the team comp that we're looking to pick and ban here. If it doesn't work, this is how what we're going to do to change it.
What's your prediction for this set?
I think it's going to be 3-2.
3-2, wow.
I think Paradigm is an extremely good team. We scrimmed them yesterday, and they have just some weird tactics. They're very
Stuff you don't want to talk about right now.
Yeah, exactly.
course.
They have a lot of pocket picks, a lot of pocket strats that they can pull out at any time, and they probably have the deepest meta, if that makes sense, because they're, you know what I like. I like Apollo, Nisha, Blanke. Funballer can literally play anything from like Freya to like Arachne. Like they just play anything. Same for Tricksting and same for the rest of their team. They just, when they pick and ban, you don't know where any of their gods are going. So I think off of that alone, I think they can take a few games off of Epsilon. But I think the overall skill of Epsilon will take them to the win.
Well, let's actually talk about the Hunter role since we have you here. Imelito versus Funballer in a 1v1 matchup. Who do you give it to?
I think they're pretty much even.
Really?
I think Funball is an extremely good defensive ADC, and Imelito is an extremely good aggressive ADC. It's kind of like the me and Zatman matchup. He will aggress on me over and over and over again, and then I will defend and see how it works. And a lot of times we're just butting heads and breaking even. So I think that's what's going to happen here.
What kind of picks and bans do you guys think is going to be revolved around the Hunter role Adanas?
I think we'll see what we've seen probably throughout this tournament, where there's going to be a lot of Jablankes or Neath, depending on if you want to control the pace of the early game with Neath, or really just look for the global presence of Jablanke and to carry you into the late game. If a fun ball like off screen. I think so. Remember what I'm going to break off from this. Remember what I was talking about last night, or where if Paradigm, kind of celebrated the fact that they're going to Worlds. I think Funball celebrated the fact that he's going to Worlds there.
Where did we see this last? Didn't we see in the launch tournament when they were Dignitas? They celebrated before the finals against
was
was
Zatman and Lassus against Team Solomid? I'm pretty sure they went in a little distraught, I'd say, in at least the first game. It took them a little bit to wake up. But no, Funball, I think like BaRRaCCuDDa said, playing a lot of defensive hunters. I think there will be the Jablanke where he's kind of going to be on the back foot. He's played a lot of that. I don't think we've seen Soul out of him too much. Maybe a game. It did go to Lobster, though, in the mid lane. I don't really expect Soul to be pretty heavily prioritized in this set, though.
Yeah, I mean, we saw her day 1 continuously picked and banned, and then day 2, and then day 3 she started to fall off, and then yesterday she definitely seemed to be less of a priority. Why are people starting to realize that she might be overvalued?
They're just going back to their comfort picks. We saw Reels switching back to his favorite, Freya, his Rama. So that's why teams are leaning a little bit more away now as the land progresses. People are figuring out like specific land meta, right? So that's what Reels did. He strayed away from the Soul, and then he went to the Freya and the Rama.
I definitely think we're going to see Freya today. Imelito definitely prefers to pick Freya, and we even saw London Conspiracy ban out Freya in Game 3. Do you think that Paradigm is going to be banning out Freya this game, Adanas?
I don't know if they're going to be banning it away, but it's definitely a possibility. I think Freya will be a pretty heavily contested pick in this matchup, Imelito, and like the combination that that Iraffer and Imelito do with the Freya is pretty nasty. They ran the Sylvanas, and they actually have their perfect combo where like level 4, they're going to whoop you with Freya Banish, and then before the player hits the ground, Iraffer's got the pull, and it's just so much poke damage, and they can do that every time the pull's off cooldown, and they even got an early first blood off it. I think level 3, so...
How about level 2, actually?
It was level 2, okay, yeah, so... Oh, wow, he didn't even... So they just they would aggress on a level 2, yeah. Like, they've got that lane planned down. I think Funballer will be looking to pick it or ban it away.
What about supports? Are we going to see Bacchus from Trickstank?
Yes.
I hope so.
It'll be in the set somewhere.
Definitely.
Why does Bacchus do so well, and why does Trickstank do so well with Bacchus?
He likes to play aggressive gods. We've seen him in the SPL play gods like Thor as well. So Bacchus is a very heavy initiation god. It creates a lot of chaos and disruption with his burp, with his intoxicate. It's really difficult to get away. He has a very high burst, so it just suits him so well. And we see him here with this Fire Giant Steel.
BaRRa, would you ever prefer Jeff to pick Bacchus?
No.
That's like that was like one of his favorite gods too, right? Like why do you guys not run Bacchus? Why don't you guys value this pick?
He's just really, really, really bad in laning phase. If you don't get to lane first, your Bacchus will never be able to control the wave, if that makes sense. And in NA, we're playing against a lot more aggressive lanes that are pushing us. So in NA, it's all about getting to lane first, and Bacchus is not a support that gets you to lane first.
So mid lane is very interesting. Yamian and Lobster. I'm hoping we get to see a Medusa versus Neath lane. We've seen both these players play hunters in the middle role. What do hunters provide in the mid lane that mages don't?
They have more burst early on with the Neath Spirit Arrow, especially if you go red pot on her and you try to, or if you try to rush Transcendence, you're gonna have just more general burst in the early game, and they can provide a little bit more global pressure if you have the Neath in the mid lane on the side lanes, which is very important to control. If you have a weaker matchup, you can exploit it.
Why did Medusa work with Yamian?
I think just it was a pretty one-sided matchup. I honestly, like, adapting puts so much pressure on the mid lane that the Medusa can just work in team fights in general, and they can force issues really well. Yaman kind of plays off of whatever adapting is doing. Adapting sets the pace for their game plan, and then Yaman is just always there following up and just basically Yaman just follows adapting around.
Well, let's talk more about that. Adapting, everyone always talks about how he is probably the best player in the world. BaRRaCCuDDa, do you agree?
Definitely.
And what sets him apart from all the other players?
We scrimmed against them, it was like Monday, and it was a 1v3 and I was Soul, and he was fighting us, and he was fighting us as Hoonbots, and he would just bounce around. Like, it was insane to watch, and I would press my 2 and he would be auto-attacking Andy, and then he would just turn around and juke my 2, and I'm like,
So how does
he respond so quickly?
How do you get to that level? How do you become so far ahead from all the other players that play at an amazing professional level?
You gotta obviously put in the hours in, and what also helps is the chemistry that you have around you to elevate that game plan. When you're communicating at such a high level, everything is clicking, then that's how your skill just really outshines other teams.
I do have to say too, Epsilon as a team will commit to whatever call. Like, when one person goes in, the full team commits. I do want to talk about the 3v5 where when they faced Lone Conspiracy, I think in game 3, and adapting was on Thor. And what happened was they actually had their Fire Giant. They were pushing in. They lost 2 members, so they had to defend their own tier 2 tower as we saw Lone Conspiracy pushing in. And literally, adapting goes, "We can fight." And then Yaman goes, "I don't know, man. It's 3v5. Are you sure?" And then adapting goes, "I'm ulting." And then the team just went in. Like, it's like, you laugh, but like the team went in. Like, he's like, okay, Iraffer blinks in, and then Yaman goes in. He was on Zeus, like throwing down his stuff, and then adapting just 1v3'd in the back line. Like, it's just like there's so much trust on the team. Even when the team's unsure of the call, they'll commit to it if adapting goes in or if anyone goes in.
How does their synergy and communication differ from Paradigms? Or how does Paradigms differ from theirs?
Paradigm has been around for a while also, and I think that their communication is also pretty good, but it's not as consistent as Epsilon. Epsilon is like more calculating, whereas Paradigm's more emotional, where if they have a good play, they'll like, similar to how we saw Fnatic yesterday. We heard the
Scream really loud?
So that's basically the difference. Emotion versus like methodical calculation.
Well, then who do you, like, with that in mind, do you feel that methodical is going to be better?
I don't see Paradigm, if they have confusion in comms, it's not the worst because they've been playing together for so long. Like, a lot of their responses are natural. Jeff Hinla, like, no matter what he's doing in a fight, always has probably his like eyeballs like on your health bar. I would imagine. Like, he's always willing and or ready, and even if he doesn't, even if comms get cluttered, like, the players just know who to peel for. They have a game plan going in, and they know who they need to protect and kind of the style they play.
Soul Laners, Demi versus Zalia. Who do you give it to?
It's going to be a very dynamic matchup. I think that Demi's going to play more standard god. Zalia might experiment around and go...
We saw him play Tyr in Hades.
Isis.
Yes.
I know he played that.
Shock, I think he played once also. So I think Zalia experiments a little bit more, whereas Demi's more comfortable on safe gods like Sobek. We saw him play fantastic on Sobek. I think he only had 1 or 2 deaths the whole
I don't know.
3-0 that they had.
We saw
Zalia versus Fnatic? Or Paradigm versus
No,
Fnatic?
Demi. I think Demi
Oh,
only
Demi?
had 2.
Yeah, Demi doesn't die.
He
I
only
don't know
had 2
how
deaths.
Demi doesn't die. Look at that, 17.4 KD. That was from the fall split, right? Yeah. He
No,
just
I think
doesn't
that's
die.
the land, was it? Or is that...
Well, no, I mean, it might be the land. No, that's the fall split. But yeah, like on tier, he just controlled the pace of the game. And, you know, going into games, you're like not expecting tier to just like be so dominant. But it's Demi. He just knows how to get ahead. Their team as a whole is so efficient at farming. Like, I don't get it. I want to ask you, BaRRa, because you guys are actually really good at farming too. I remember in one of the games versus Eager, you were down multiple kills. You had some camps invaded, but you were still out farming. I believe it was COG. Is it just like, do you practice like back timings and stuff and like know when to back, or how does that work? How do you farm so efficiently?
Back timings is extremely important. Also, one thing that's really overlooked is back harpies. Whenever you're behind or whenever your opponent has map pressure, you always want to get your back RBs as soon as they spawn. Pretty much within probably 1 or 2 seconds, you have to be dropping those. And
But when do you know to take those over other camps or aggressing a lane?
We pretty much do like I guess one person in every lane, and then we have 2 rotators, which are Andy and Jeff, and they're rotating on trying to alleviate the map pressure while I'll be able to aggress and push my lane and then go back to solo the back RBs, or Stealth will be able to solo the back RBs, or someone soloing the back RBs right when they spawn. That's extremely important. And whenever we're behind, if you guys ever come to our comms, like I'm saying, we have to do the back RBs right on time because they're going to be looking for the buff invades. They're going to be looking for purple, red, and speed if they have map pressure. But normally teams don't really time the opponent's back RPs because that's kind of a less important thing. But when you're behind, every bit of farm on the map is extremely important.
Is there anything that Epsilon needs to look out for with Paradigm?
I think, speaking of back harpies, is Paradigm actually invades early on if they have the superior mid-jungle position, that they'll look for the enemy's back harpies. A couple of times we've seen that in the SPL from them, where Cuvo Fred will be that initiator. They'll look for the level 2 or level 3 play in the opponent's back harpies and look for a potential first blood.
Let's talk about the junglers, actually. Like you said, Cuvo Fred versus adapting. How does Cuvo Fred size up against adapting?
Where it really seems that adapting kind of controls the pace of the game for Epsilon. I don't believe Cuvo really controls the pace of the game for Paradigm. I think a lot of that's kind of I think Trix controls the pace of game for Paradigm. So Cuvo's typically looking for whatever Trix is doing, and they combo well off each other. And Lobster's always willing to help them out or rotate to a side lane. So Cuvo Fred, it's weird because I don't think he has like a definite play style. I think he kind of just will play whatever god they want to fit their composition or whatever style they need. I know against Zeus, they ran the Bastet because that was his job. Literally, it's like, Cuvo Fred, you're going into this game, you're picking Bastet, we have some mid-game pressure, and you're going to jump on Zeus and kill him. Like, that's your game plan.
Well, I want to talk about what you just said, how you feel that adapting controls the pace of the game for them and how Trixie controls it for Paradigm. What is the main difference that you see when you have the jungler control it or the support control it, BaRRa?
I think it's pretty much the same, to be honest. The jungler and the support, especially how Trix plays support, pretty much do the same amount of damage and the same amount of setup in the early stages of the game. And I think once you get into the mid stage of the game, I think Cuvo Fred comes more online, and then Trixton kind of falls off because just items and scaling. So I think a lot of the early game, you'll see Trix being kind of the leader and playing whatever he's on, Bacchus or any other gods that I won't say. He'll just kind of be the leader, he'll be poking, he'll be aggressing, whereas Cuvo, like Adanas, will be kind of like the mid person, whereas in other teams that would be their support, and then the jungler would be the furthest up. So I think when you're watching these games, I think Trix is going to be the most aggressive player on Paradigm, and I think if Paradigm's able to get ahead through Trix's aggression, that's how Paradigm's going to win games.
Totally. What do you benefit by having an aggressive Guardian?
Well, that means that as a jungler, you don't have to worry too much about your health bar, because obviously the Guardian is going to take the most damage out of that. And that allows you to get off all your cooldown rotations, back off, and then look for the re-engage potentially. The longer the teamfight lasts, the better it is.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of aggressive junglers, and that almost be the downfall for a lot of teams. Do you think that we're going to see an aggressive jungler, obviously out of adapting, but out of Paradigm?
I think they have to. Honestly, I don't think they can go a late game god in the jungle against Epsilon. I think Epsilon are so good at getting a lead, holding it, and then forcing more. I know we actually saw yesterday, Fnatic versus Eager, we saw that very aggressive Eager comp with Isis Thanatos. However, they didn't have any really hard initiate. They had a Kepri without Blink, so they couldn't really aggress into anything. And we saw, even with that, even with Fnatic holding for so long, Eager was still was able to get like a 5k lead against a late game team comp. Unfortunately for them, they made some misplays outside of that and they fell. But Epsilon, they'll run a hard initiate on iRapper and they will force stuff. Like, you aren't safe under your tower. And they're going to force Gold Furies. And if you try and defend those Gold Furies, their main plan isn't the Gold Fury, it's to force initiations and try and kill you. So if you play a slow-paced game against Epsilon, I think they're so good at controlling the early game that you can't. I think we need to see Cuvo on a strong early god that can not only clear camps fast, but also fight pre-5.
Well, let's talk about the early game. Do you think we're going to see an invade?
Yeah, actually, the dual lane, Funballer and Trickstank, they've run double warriors before, I
Yes.
think, in the
It
SPL
went,
split.
when the first Bluestone patch came out, I think, when it was like real big, there was a couple double warrior lanes.
It's like
Yeah.
Guan Wukong.
Yeah, Wukong, and I think one of them had Creeping Curse, and that's what they made work after the purple buff invade. It's very strong when you have double warriors. You have to take advantage of that level 1. That could be a potential strategy that Paradigm runs. We'll see if they've been practicing it and execute it.
What about early objective taking? Are we going to see that before the 10-minute mark?
I maybe, but that's just going to be if a team has an early lead. I don't think anyone's going to like try and sneak anything. I think we've seen like 2 or 3 Gold Fury sneaks pre-5. Most teams are pretty map aware though right now at LAN, so it's hard to kind of like sneak stuff with like objective
I
control.
think a lot of early objectives in this series is going to be adapting versus Trickstank if their calls are working. And I don't think the objective is going to be gold for. I think it's going to be buff invades depending on the drafts of both of these teams.
What about the mid game? How does that vary?
Like middle versus middle? You mean Yemen versus...
No, I
South?
mean from transitioning
Okay.
from the early game into the mid game, what are the teams going to be doing differently?
It's going to depend on, how the early game started, the comps, if they were managing to invade, if they made it work, how are they transitioning that lead? Like we saw Eager yesterday, they had an early lead, but they couldn't really transition it into the mid game, and that's why they started falling behind. So if Paradigm is looking for that early game strategy, and they don't get it to the mid game with Gold Furies, or consistently taking buffs and killing people, then they're going to not be able to execute efficiently late game, because Epsilon's probably going to be able to take it.
And that's really what Epsilon likes, is they'll pick like some pretty high pressure. They make sure they don't have comps that lose early game, that they can at least stay even. And then about the 12 to 15 minute mark, depending on if they're even or if they have a decent lead that they've garnered, they will force stuff. Like the 12 to 15 minute mark is like Epsilon's like, that is their key moment where they're invading buffs, where they're forcing Gold Furies, where they're all grouping up and rotating for towers. If Paradigm can hold on till then, I think that's when we're going to see maybe Epsilon get over-aggressive. But for me, I honestly think Paradigm should run, I don't want to say jank or like cheese, but I think they shouldn't run the LAN meta. Like
Yeah, I
the
agree.
LAN meta that's developed in North America, I think a lot of what their game plan should be centered around is getting Xaylia on something he can dominate with mid-game and late game.
Well, what is that? What god could he dominate with?
I mean, we could see a hyper carry, but running hyper carries is super risky. We haven't really seen it too much at this LAN, but he's run Mercury. He's like, he is Paradigm's player. When they need someone to show up, it's Xaylia. And like, even if he has bad matchups, he just wins lane.
And we've seen him play so many gods, Chalk, Nua, Osiris, Zhang, Bel, Hel, and that's just during the tournament this week. Do we think we have another god that he hasn't shown up yet?
I think Xaylia could play anything.
Anything?
Yes. I'm not saying he will, but I think his god pool is literally every god in sight.
Like I was talking about earlier, their meta is so... I wouldn't even call it a meta.
Yeah,
Just
no.
Their drafts are so deep that when they're picking and banning, I don't know if they go over it beforehand, like, okay, we're going to first pick BaRRaCCuDDa, and it's going to go to our support player. Like, that's literally how deep their drafts are. And when they're drafting, I think they need to draft a early game pressure comp that pressures before Epsilon's power spike, and they need to pressure between 8 to 10 minutes. And during that pressure, the red and the speed will be in respawning, so that should be when Paradigm should be looking to make plays.
What gods give them the best opportunity for that early pressure?
I would say anywhere between Bacchus, Bastet, Zeus,
Which is the gods that
Neith.
they have been playing throughout the
Exactly.
week. But isn't that something that Epsilon can then expect? What did Epsilon learn watching them? Because Paradigm has played now 8 games, I believe. They were in a best of 5 and then 3-0'd. So they've learned a lot from them. What have they learned?
Well, they learned that Funballer leans a little bit more towards Xbalanque against Dignitas. I think he ran it 3 games out of 5 specifically. Obviously, the Bacchus from Trickstank, the Neith from Lobster. Xaylia's played a bunch of gods, so it's hard to predict against that. I think they need to more lean on towards their own style of play than worrying about Paradigm. All they have to do is just ward early on. If they're expecting shenanigans, they'll see it, and then they'll adapt to it pretty efficiently.
I mean, Epsilon kind of decimated 3-0. And do you feel like Paradigm learned anything from those games or just learned that they're really good?
I think they learned that they're really good, and also, I think they already knew that they were really good. It's really hard because we
27-1.
didn't really see Epsilon get too in depth with their strategies. I think the only thing that maybe we saw was the Medusa mid, and I feel like that wasn't anything that they felt was a core strategy. I think that was something that honestly, I believe that was like game 2 or 3.
2.
It was
Yeah.
2. I felt like I almost feel like Epsilon knew they had that set after game 1. and they just kind of like played something that they were on the fringe with, and it's like, okay, we feel and then honestly after that game, whether they felt it was successful or not, they're like, okay, this works. Maybe we can try something similar. Epsilon, I think, has been the only team who's been able to come into this tournament so far and not feel pressured and actually be able to experiment in this tournament. I don't know, man. Epsilon's so good.
But Barry, you gave the set 3-2, so obviously Paradigm has something to do or something against Epsilon. What is that, or is that something you can't talk about?
I'll just leave it as early pressure. Paradigm's extremely strong at pushing early and punishing you for making mistakes early game. Also, Funball is a really good late game ADC, so if Trix can get them through the early game, I think Funball or Zayla will be able to carry it later.
I actually do want to see Epsilon lose early a game because we have never seen it. We've never seen Epsilon like be down heavily pre 15 minutes, and the only game they lost during the fall split was to Fnatic, where the game was I think even until like the 12 or 15 minute mark, and then they had a wonky gold series where they got wiped and lost the gold, and Fnatic was able to snowball hard off that. But like outside of that, we haven't really seen Epsilon ever lose early.
But how does something like a wonky Gold Fury turn it around for a team that's so dominant?
It's just that
Wouldn't
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the exact comps on that game. It was kind of like in the middle of split.
It
but
was like Thanatos jungle for adapting.
Yeah, that's it. They had a Thanatos jungle, and it like couldn't do anything.
Yeah,
because they were like 6K down.
I mean, we saw Thanatos didn't really work out yesterday either.
Thanatos didn't really get down.
Thanatos
early,
wasn't the issue yesterday for the Eager game. It was just they couldn't like group up as a team and push their objectives. Like they couldn't get any towers. The one time they tried to get mid tower, it didn't really work out for them. They were fighting. I think it was 4-on-5. I think Omega was on the speed buff, and he didn't group up with them. And then because Eager rushed that objective without Omega, they kind of fell behind. They had some sloppy ultimates coming out of an offensive Isis ultimate. A missed Thanatos ulti. Kepri missed his ulti on the Isis that died. It landed on the Thanatos, and that's kind of what happened.
We've definitely seen this entire tournament is about counter-engaging, punishing, and taking advantages, whether it's in small increments or giant steals. Who do you think has the best counter-engage out of these two teams?
I mean, we can't really determine that until we have team comps. But
Fair enough.
It's like Epsilon are never pressured, so it's hard to say. I'm assuming they can play when they're behind as well. But we just never seen Epsilon behind, so it's really hard to determine. I mean, Epsilon are typically the aggressors, or at least we're not going to aggress until the 15-minute mark. We're just going to make sure that we play even based on their composition.
So, late game. If it does get to late game, it's just going to Epsilon?
No, I think if it goes to late game, like the 40-minute mark plus, it's going to come down to like that one team fight for both of those teams around Fire Giant.
I think like that's going to be the best chance outside of like that's mid game. I don't like for
Paradigm?
For Paradigm. I think like an early pressure comp or like somehow they manage to become even in late game, because I think Paradigm. I think most teams at the high end competitive level can compete with Epsilon when it comes to late game. If like everything's even and then it comes down to like team comps and both team comps are pretty even, I think people know how to team fight very well. I think it's Epsilon is just so good at taking early advantages and abusing that into heavy leads.
BaRRa, when it does get into that late game, we've seen a few of these games get to the 40 and even 50-minute mark. How does your playstyle change?
For my team, me and Stealth are in the far back, and then it's Andy and Baskin and just kind of playing midfield. So as far as playstyle, you never look aggressive as a hunter or a mage. You never position yourself aggressive. So I think, like Adanas was saying, these teams know how to team fight. And if you get to that stage, it's anyone's game, and that comes down to picks and bans.
You've had some of the longest games against Eager. All of them were like 40 to 45-minute mark. How does that play on your mind as the game progresses, as the series progresses?
I think my team's the best at endurance sets, and I don't think we've ever lost a best of 5. So as far as us, me and Jeff try to keep everyone focused, keep everyone hyped up, and it's extremely important. Mindset is everything in best of 5s. It doesn't matter if you get down early. It doesn't matter if you just lost 2 games. Everything comes down to how good you are at staying focused. And a lot of these teams we've seen cannot stay focused for that long, and it's extremely, extremely hard. It's like taking the SATs and the questions changing every 2 seconds in front of you. You're constantly adapting to situations, and I don't think a lot of these players have that kind of experience. Like, like Adanas was saying, like Epsilon's new to this, and I think if Paradigm's able to take them to a best of 5, I think that's how they can take at least 2 games off of them.
Well, we're about to find out how this set goes, everyone. It's Epsilon versus Paradigm. It's not for going to the World Championships, but for that seeding and, of course, title of the best European team to the casters.